I gave my response a title, and the title is The Ever-Present Messiah and the Healing and Preparation of His Bride. It fits in with the last question. But I want to start with the words with which I started also my book, Learning Messiah. A goy, that's me. And today I also wish to start with these words. I am a goy, a non-Jewish believer in conversation with Mark Kinzer, a post-missionary Messianic Jew. We both live with the eschatological challenge and hope of all Israel and the multitude from the nations to be unified in bridal love for God and His Messiah. The morning prayer of Jewish men, Mark spoke about it, when binding their phylacteries, cites Hosea 2, verse 21-22. In these verses, the threefold promise of Israel's God to espouse His people Israel, to make it into His bride for eternity, is there. There runs a bridal love line from Tanakh through these Jewish morning prayers unto the last chapters of Revelation. For there, the eschatological bride of Messiah Yeshua is being revealed as the resurrected New Jerusalem welcoming the nations. But why is it still important that I state that I am a goy? That is because Mark shared his vision for this eschatological reunification of Israel with the Church of the Nations. And he stressed the fact that post-missionary Messianic Jews are an essential and necessary factor in bringing this eschatological hope for a single but twofold people of God to fruition. Mark, in his phase 2, has caused also a lot of ripples. He caused a lot of discussion to originate. And I will go into that. The I am a goy principle is important because I am a not Jew. I'm a goy. So we as non-Jews are in principle the audience, listening to Jewish voices, searching for the way their halakha in Messiah should be. So when Jews are talking with each other, be it Antoine Levy, be it Mark Kinzer, be others within Yachad BeYeshua, I am in principle the audience, and I'm listening. So my fellow Jewish believers, whether post-missionary, missionary, Torah obedient, or exalting grace above Torah, Messianic or Jewish Christian, would not be so happy for me or the Ecclesia ex gentibus as a whole to again prescribe their way of discipleship. Therefore, in this conversation with Mark, I will try to serve as a matchmaker, perhaps bringing Mark and the people or positions that he addresses, and some people are very vehemently objecting. I want to try to bring the people together to be a matchmaker, and also to elaborate a bit more on themes that cause distance or misunderstandings. Mark, he put it today in some other words, but he, when he describes post-missionary Messianic Judaism, he says there are 3 characteristics, and the second one is the most important feature. Post-missionary Messianic Judaism, I quote, discovers God and Messiah in the midst of Israel. It is about the paradoxical claim, again a quote, that Jesus is already present at the center of Jewish life and religion. Within the Messianic Jewish movement, but also elsewhere, people frowned, disagreed, or asked how this in the world could be. And I think it's wise to spend some time on this important issue. For in my opinion, these negative reactions may partly be caused by the fact that our thinking about God's self-revelation and about the history of both Israel and the nations since the appearance of Messiah is often still marred by supersessionist influence. The historical period in which we live and of which Judaism and both the Ecclesia ex circumcisione and the Ecclesia ex gentibus are part of should, in a real post-supersessionist manner, be designated as the period of the exile of the Shekhinah from Jerusalem. It is the clear, I repeat, this period should be designated as the period of the exile of the Shekhinah from Jerusalem. For it is the clear message of Tanakh that God will never not be with his people. Whatever the reasons for the exile and the resulting diaspora, he promised to accompany his people in whatever lands they may end up. His presence even will go in front of them. He will lead the way into exile, exiling himself from Jerusalem, as we see happening in Ezekiel's vision. So, Tanakh knows of the faithful presence of God amidst his people Israel, regardless of times and circumstances. The divine words that Jacob hears when he flees into exile shows the structure of God's faithfulness to his people. God will accompany, safeguard, return the people home, not forsake them, and fulfill all that he has spoken. Genesis 28, verse 15. So already on the basis of Tanakh alone, God's presence is to be expected amidst the Jewish people at any time. And he will return to his home city and lead his people there too. But then one could ask, did this change with the appearance of Messiah Yeshua? And the answer is no, on the contrary. It is being strengthened. Messiah Yeshua is the living embodiment of the glory of God. He is the living Shekhinah amidst Israel. And his leaving the temple and placing himself at the Mount of Olives, Matthew 24, reminds us therefore of the vision of Ezekiel. Exile is waiting for Yeshua himself and for the people. His entering into death outside the city has the characteristics of an entering into an exile from life and from Jerusalem. Yeshua experiences this both as Israel's divine Shekhinah companion and as the first one of Israel. He leads the way, entering the darkest of darknesses in the day of the Lord. And his followers, also his Messianic Jewish followers, will follow suit, being forced out of Jerusalem, and later the whole of the people will be exiled by the Romans. The still existing exilic circumstances of the people will be deepened to the utmost. But one could say, has he not risen from the dead? Has he not been enthroned since then, after ascending from the Mount of Olives? Certainly, yes, but that does not negate the exile character of his leaving Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. And his exile from Jerusalem has still not ended yet. Here I differ from Mark. He too interprets Yeshua's death as him experiencing in an anticipatory manner the punishment of exile. I see that too, but I, however, am of the opinion that this exile has not finished for him yet. His physical separation from Jerusalem implies and shows that the full realization of his kingship over Israel and the nations is not yet there. We have been focusing on his enthronement in heaven, and we have neglected or been unable to understand his simultaneous exile from the home city of God. We did not recognize that he, both by free will and forced, went into this exile as the living embodiment of the Shekhinah and as the first one of Israel. And we did not see that he led the way in this for all Israel. We did not realize that in this exile he accompanied all Israel, and that he reached out and still reaches out to the nations during this exile period. Christian mission is happening in the period of the exile of the Messiah from Jerusalem, the exile of the Shekhinah from the city of God. And Jewish sages have interpreted the exile as a God-given opportunity to bring God's name to the nations. Likewise, also Yeshua reaches out to them and is orienting them toward Jerusalem, where he wishes to return to. We can conclude by stating that in a divine, mysterious manner, in this period of the exile of the Shekhinah and its embodiment in the Messiah, the people of Israel as a whole, and both the Ecclesia ex circumcisione and the Ecclesia ex gentibus, are accompanied by the presence of God in Messiah. God promised to not forsake his people, bearing all Israel on his heart, as shown by the breast shield of the high priest. His presence, therefore, resides in some manner even amidst secular Jews. A full realization of this all would have resulted in a different attitude of the Christian church toward the whole of the people of Israel. It would have affected positively the mutual relations between both parts of the body of Messiah. It would imply also that Jesus-believing Jews should and could look more favorably upon Judaism and the whole of the people of Israel as such, knowing that God's and Messiah's presence are to be expected in some manner there. It would create a togetherness between Israel and the church, sharing in God's and Messiah's wish to return to Zion. It would have brought us also to a deeper participation in Messiah's afflictions that are oriented toward unifying all Israel with this great multitude from the nations into the one Kehillah of Adonai. Read Colossians 1 verse 24 in this perspective. The implications of this discovery of his presence might not be clear at once, or people could differ in regard to them. But the intense reactions to what Mark deemed the most important characteristic of post-missionary Messianic Judaism might have been different if people would have begun to reckon with this promised reality. At least everybody should then acknowledge that in some hidden way, Messiah Yeshua, Jesus, has been and will be present among all Israel, as also in the Ecclesia ex gentibus, until his return to Zion, until the end of the days. In his lecture, Mark showed the different phases, and we are really, and Mark said, I won't see the end in my life. Things are really happening, and we can see also in our country that there is a spillover of Mark's work, a spillover from the conference that we had in Vienna. There is really something happening. And that is because there is a hope. There is a hope because God wants to unify his people. A hope of a deepened oikumene, a deepened katholike, a hope for the wholeness of the twofold people of God. That is what the heart of God longs for. It's not providence in an unqualified way. It is the waiting and the love politics of the great Son of David, who is waiting for all Israel to unite under his kingship, fulfilling all promises given to the patriarchs. Just like David, just like David had to wait in Hebron, waiting together with the patriarchs buried there for the God-willed uniting of the tribes to come about. And Hebron is from the root that means to unify, unification. Divine providence is directed towards this goal. Living in this, what I would call the Hebron phase of Messiah's kingship, and believing that his ultimate goal will be reached anyway, I would designate every Jewish believer, regardless of the variety, to be a sign of the hidden presence of God and Messiah amidst all Israel, and of his continuing eternal election of his people Israel. That is the case even when my fellow Jewish believers are not aware of all these deep things. Mark also says that in these three phases he showed that things are coming together. The Jewish Christian that he was in phase first is coming together with the post-missionary activist Jew that he was in phase two in a more balanced and in a unifying way. But then the discussion within Messianic Judaism or Jewish believers, in what way can we serve God's ultimate longings? That's a point of discussion in which we, non-Jews, are in the first place the audience. But that there is discussion about how should our life would be? What would our halakha, how should our halakha be? That's a rightful thing. And Mark challenges us also to think. By the way, non-Jewish believers, who is a non-Jewish believer in Jesus here? Oh, well, quite some. There are commandments incumbent on us as well. Grace implies a no to blood sausage. Ja? Geen bloedworst. Ja? Dat hoort bij de genade. Jammer voor de slagers. Sorry. We should begin to change. No, I spoke Dutch and I'm excusing myself for it. When we as non-Jews are not permitted to eat blood sausage, and we have neglected this, then it is only logical that Jewish believers are asking themselves, what are the covenantal obligations, the halakha in Messiah, for us? Mark pleads for a Messianic halakha in accordance with and close nearness to Jewish traditions. And he also showed that there is something going on, Messianic Jewish believers being part of synagogues. There is 18 centuries of distance are being not gapped at the moment, but there is something going on. And I think that still sticking to I am a goy perspective, and without going into specifics, I think that Mark's plea in general would fit in with Yeshua's and the first generation of Jewish believers. When I was a young theological student, I had to write a paper about Matthew 23, verse 23, about the tithing of the little, I don't know the English, kruiden, weet je wel, de dillen, de munt en de komijn, maar, oh yes. And Jesus doesn't say that the tithing is wrong. He says only don't forget the most important, what it is all about. So personally, I think that Mark's plea in general would fit in with Yeshua's and the first generation's believers' attitude to the issue of halakha. This makes that we should also consider the implications of Messiah's presence among all Israel. It is clear that the church has not preached the true evangelion. Mark elsewhere coins the term fractured evangelion, the broken gospel, but he doesn't want to use the word gospel, evangelion. The church was thinking and preaching about Jesus and his blessings, and the people of Israel cleaved itself with all intensity to God's eternal promises relating to his election of Israel, Jerusalem, and the land. In our days, we start to understand a bit that the evangelion was fractured, as were the prayers of both Israel and the church. The prayers of the church circled around Jesus the Christ and his blessings, as interpreted from a de-Israelized and supersessionist perspective. And Israel's prayers reminded God of his love for Israel as his Am Segula, his treasured possession. Messiah Yeshua, ever present amidst Israel and amidst his church of the nations, has both these prayer directions on his heart. He groaned and still groans, Romans 8, for them to become reality. The two prayer communities didn't share in his unifying, groaning prayers, but did they share in parts of them? Has his presence not been a presence also in prayer for those in whose midst he was present? Did his Spirit fill in what was left out, since, Romans 8, we do not know what we ought to pray for? I think the priestly service of Messiah has the same threefold structure that we can observe in the totality of the God-willed order for tabernacle, temple, and priestly service. There is a place, the most holy place, where the Messiah is alone acting. But there is also the holy and the courtyard where others may join in. Is it possible that both prayer directions of Israel and the church shared in his prayers that were presented both in heaven and at the same time from his exiled presence on earth? The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. Who has known the mind of the Lord? But we have the mind of Christ, 1 Corinthians 2. Did we understand all the deep things of Messiah? Confronted with the fractured evangelion, we must conclude that this has not been the case. A communal, humble recognition thereof and a communal, prayerful searching for understanding should be our reaction. For the healing of the fractured divine message has everything to do with the healing of the twofold people of God. And let us not be fractured while seeking to overcome historic fractures. Like Mark, I see first of all that in order to be a living witness to this vision of the twofold people of God, given our tragic history of Christian hatred, such witness is most fittingly born through a humble way of life, which demonstrates joint commitment to Jesus and the Jewish people. Sometimes, however, an addition to such humble life is asked for, an addition of words. Likely and ideally, it will be asked from Jewish followers of Jesus. But it can be asked also from non-Jewish followers of Messiah. And then it's very crucial. Is our message totally recasted? Did we learn the real evangelion? Did we learn really the bold message that starts with the pre-creation love and election of God for his people Israel, wishing it to be the center of the light for all nations and all of creation, reaching all the way to the eschatological realization of God's wish to press in a bodily fashion Israel, and in Israel all of creation, to his heart? a new narrative that binds God, Israel, the nations, history and creation together, and that ends in the bridal love city of a resurrected Jerusalem as the center of a resurrected world. Are we able to tell this story? Or do we have to learn it ourselves first? It would be a narrative also that calls for an intensifying of the covenantal identity of Jewish men and women. And in that manner, it may be also calling secularized Jews back to their rightful place in the covenant with the God of Israel. That we did not tell this evangelium, but hated and persecuted or derogated and denunciated the Jewish people, has caused a collective transgenerational trauma and aversion to God's divine Besorah, the gospel in Hebrew, in the Jewish people as a whole. It is also a collective guilt. Understanding this, we should realize that this situation is totally different from that of Jesus and the first generations. And reading verses in the New Testament about rejection of the message of Yeshua as the Messiah and interpreting them should make us think twice before applying them in a simply straightaway manner to present-day encounters with Jewish people. Mark says elsewhere, the no toward Jesus has in fact often been a yes to the God of Israel. And yet, Messiah Yeshua has been present. Mark already in his last answer quoted or referred to Joseph. Yet Messiah Yeshua has been present as the living embodiment of the Shekhinah all the way long, as a Joseph caring, as an Ezekiel giving spiritual directions, as a Ezra Nehemiah returning the people to Torah and covenantal halakha. Has he also been present as David? David, deeply troubled by his companion Joab killing other Jews because David's kingship should be acknowledged. Did Messiah Yeshua suffer likewise because of such unholy attempts on the side of the Christian church to force the allegiance of the Jewish people? Has he been present? And is he still present, understanding and forgiving the post-traumatic reluctance in the bottom of Judaism? What are the full implications of his being present all the way long? Can we know for sure? His presence does not mean, I quote Mark, that the Jewish people have lived and suffered blamelessly through the centuries. And Jewish sages would acknowledge that. But we are not called and capable to know the depth that only he knows. His presence has been and still is the fullest expression of God's faithfulness. He was, and I quote again Mark, at least as intimate a presence among the Jewish people as he was in the church. In these days of 2025, 1700 years after Nicaea, we must be grateful for Mark for insisting on the twofold character of the ecclesia, for that bilaterality forms the beginning of the eschatological reality of the healing of the twofold people of God. It is therefore that both Jews and non-Jews are called to discover their specific identity within this healing process in order to be and become a visible expression of this unity in Messiah. Since the focus of this conversation was on post-missionary Messianic Judaism, I didn't elaborate on the theme what the post-supersessionist Nicene church would or should like. But I think we have much to consider, and I won't trigger your thoughts. I have the lines here, but I won't give them because my time is probably gone. And I will close with referring to my title. May the ever-present Messiah guide all of us through his Spirit and heal and prepare his bride, the twofold people of God. Thank you.
Thank you, Edjan. My main response is Amen. I think this reflection on the exile of the Shekhinah is a very helpful way of viewing the ongoing presence of God, the ongoing presence of the Messiah in the midst of the Jewish people. And I am especially grateful for those reflections about the fractured Besorah, the fractured gospel. I do think this is a critical perspective for us to have, both because there's so much that we need to recover of the own message about Yeshua. We sometimes simply think, well, we have Yeshua maybe, and the synagogue has the Torah, but it's not that simple. It's not that simple. Not only because Yeshua continues to live on in the midst of the Jewish people, but because there is so much that I think the life of the church has lost about who Yeshua actually is and what he actually has done and what he will do. And therefore, there's so much of what we're talking about here, which is about recovering Yeshua. And this is why, again, I think what Edjan said about the way in which the recovery of the wholeness of the people of God is itself bound up with the recovering of the basic message of the good news itself, and that the two are cannot be separated. Part of what this can do for us, I think it needs to lead us to recognize how the gaps in our own understanding. And I think about my own, what I've learned over a 40 or 50 year period. And when I look back at these different stages, I think of, how could I not have seen this? How could I have not have seen that? Now it seems so clear to me. But I didn't see it at this earlier stage. Well, if I were to live for another 200 years, if there are such that many more years left in this world, I probably would be saying that over and over and over again in each 20-year period. And what that does is it reveals to me how little I really understand. And how little any of us really understand about these things. And there's a kind of humility and intellectual or theological humility. We understand some things, and those things that we know and we are convinced of, we need to hold to and firmly and without moving and without questioning those core realities. And at the very same time, we need to be able to step back and say how little we actually understand of the very things that we actually hold. And what that kind of perspective also does is it gives us, again, an ability to sympathize or empathize or enter into the circumstances both of fellow Christians who have not yet seen some of the things that we've seen about Israel, and with the Jewish members of the people of God who have not yet seen the things we've seen about Yeshua. All of us can be ignorant and wrong about a whole set of things and still be right about a few things. It's not one or the other. It's not a relativism. It's simply a recognition of our limitations, of our understanding of even the true things that we hold. So I think this is extremely helpful, all that Edjan has presented. Just a final comment. I do think that when it comes to Jewish followers of Jesus within the life of the church in particular, the most important thing, halachically you might say, is simply their recognition of the importance of their own Jewish identity, and they're finding some way to visibly express it. That's the critical thing, the critical piece. And that part of, I think, what the non-Jewish members of the church can do is for those Jews within your own midst, within your church world, as Edjan said, you shouldn't be there telling them how they should live as a Jew. But what you can do is try to simply help them awaken to the importance of the fact that they are a Jew, and that it's a good thing that they actually make a contribution to the life of the church when they are proud of that and when they simply look for some way to give visible expression to that identity. The way that is, they will have to determine. You can't tell them what it is, but you can help them simply come to recognize that it's important that they do so. So thank you, Edjan, both for that presentation and for all of your writings, which I think have been so beneficial and helpful.
Mark, can you expand a little bit more about the halakha, where Edjan talked about? Why do we as non-Jewish people have to learn from the halakha? He said some remarkable things.
Yes. I thought Edjan's comments, particularly about the apostolic decree, were especially provocative. And to some extent, I have some reluctance to go in this territory because I think that just as Jewish disciples of Yeshua need to be the ones to find our way, so the Gentile disciples of Yeshua have to be the ones to chart the course for your own walk, way of walking out these aspects of Torah that continue to have significance for you. All I would want to underline is the fact that they are there, that there are consequences, there are implications, halachic implications, for the life of Christians from the Torah as a gift, and that this is something that is really worth pursuing, and that the key piece of it is, I think, the apostolic decree in Acts 15 and its relationship to Leviticus chapters 17 and 18.